Thank you. Thank you very much for that warm welcome. And I am so excited to be with you guys tonight. The only downfall is I don't get to be there in person in beautiful Bermuda. I've never actually gotten to see Bermuda, but hopefully someday. So as he said in his introduction, tonight we're going to talk about the digital discipleship and evangelism model. And you guys will quickly learn that this is my favorite topic. I am truly convinced that this is the direction that we need to go. And so I'm very excited. Now, throughout this presentation, feel free to comment in the chat box. Let me know if you have any questions. If it catches my eye, I'll try and answer it in the moment. If not, we will have about 15 minutes at the end of the presentation for Q&A. But take notes. You're going to get this presentation when we're done, just so you know, but you're welcome to take notes in the moment if that helps you. Ask anything, like really anything. And you can even follow up tomorrow and ask me anything too, because this is a battle plan for our churches about how we can share the gospel and improve the well-being of others using digital tools and technologies. And one of the things I'm going to stress tonight is that this is nothing new. This is built off of a biblical model, and it is relevant in modern times. And so we're going to talk about what that looks like. So without further ado, we're going to cover the digital mission field. We're going to cover the basics of the model, and then we're going to dig into the roles, the basic roles of the model, which are content creation, community building, digital discipleship, distribution. And throughout this presentation, there's going to be links to resources for you to dig deeper on each of these topics, because this is just the beginning of a conversation. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to dig into. So I really hope that after tonight, you will take this presentation and that you will use this as sort of a launching pad for your own ministry initiatives. Now, I think we all know that we are never going to return to the old normal. We will return to a new normal. And it's time to really start thinking about what that looks like, because people are now getting used to our world in this hybrid. One of the things that really struck me when everything changed and everything shut down is I was hearing in my role, I was hearing a lot from people who were disabled or differently abled, saying that a lot of these accommodations that we were now making at, taking a full 180-degree turn, and all the churches were getting online, and they were, we were doing Zoom Bible studies and all this kind of stuff. All of these modifications were suddenly allowing more people to participate. That for so long that we had inadvertently, accidentally excluded people from our worship community and excluded people from our worship because they couldn't attend in person. And it wasn't even until a few months in that I realized that this actually included me as a new mother. You don't see new mothers in Bible studies. Why? Because we can't make it there in person. And we certainly can't focus in a Bible study with our child. But now that they're on Zoom, now that we're embracing these technologies, we're actually finding ways to include more people, regardless of, what time zone they're in or what location they're in. So we're no longer hindered by physical location, and that's a good thing. And this is a lesson that we should learn to move forward into the future. Now, I will remember March 15th, 2020 vividly, probably for the rest of my life, because this was the week in which the United States started shutting down. Now, that week, I had been very ill. It turns out probably with COVID. So I had been in bed all week. I was having asthmatic symptoms. I was having all kinds of strange symptoms, things I had never dealt with before. And on March 15th, I crawled out of bed, looked at the news, everything was shutting down. And the notifications started coming out from the North American division that they were closing the offices and stuff. And my notifications started blowing up. So at the time, I was an admin on about 50 different Adventist ministry pages. And there was one message that kept coming across, and it shocked me because, we read the Bible, we believe that Jesus is coming soon. But what I did not expect is to see the scoffers and the mockers on March 15th. Because when I opened up my notifications, message after message was people asking us, where is your God now? For some reason, they had come out of the woodwork and they were they were mocking on our social media pages, and it shocked me, because why is that their first inclination? With everything going on in the world, why are they going to religious, profiles and commenting this? And it was a theme over and over and over again. And it shocked me because I wasn't expecting it that day. And it got me to think, well, where is God? Where is God in times like this? And I thought about it. In the first century, the apostolic church took the gospel to new regions because they were fleeing persecution. So they took it out of necessity to new regions. And I don't believe that God does the bad things. We live in a world of sin. The devil is angry and he does a lot of terrible things. I don't believe that God has, inflicted us with COVID, but I believe he's using it because we as a people needed to learn how to extend the church, the worship experience, the community experience beyond the confines of time and space in a building, because a church is not a building, it's a people. And Christ's kingdom is 24/7, and we have limited to a building. And so what I believe, God is using COVID to close the building's doors so that we can learn to do church with all our tools every day of the week. So with that in mind, I want to touch upon a topic that a lot of people will, that are oftentimes, and I think the Adventist church is not alone in this, is we fear social media, or we think it's inherently negative because of all the negative influences out there. And it reminds me of a story in Exodus where God and Moses are talking, and God asks Moses, it's a very simple exchange. In Exodus 4:2, the Lord says to Moses, "What is in your hand?" And Moses responds, "A staff." It's a very simple exchange, but in the context of our time, I realize how powerful that is, because to Moses, it was a shepherd's staff. It was a simple tool. It was neither good nor bad. It was neutral. It could be used for bad, sure. It could be used to beat hapless animals or hurt people or inflict harm, or it could be used for good. It could be used to protect those sheep, to lead those sheep. But with God in the mix, that simple tool was used to perform miracles and lead the children of God out of the bondage of slavery in Egypt. And so to today, I believe that God is asking us, what is in your hand? I think the question has always been present. God is asking us to use what we have. We have a tool that with a click of a button, we can spread the gospel message around the earth. Or with a few clicks of a button, we can actually use our digital influence to improve the well-being of another person. So if there's one thing you remember from tonight, one thing you remember from this introduction to digital discipleship and evangelism, is the question, what is in your hand? And when we acknowledge that we have tools at our disposal, but we also have a relationship with God, we have the power of the Holy Spirit. A simple tool can be used to perform miracles, and it can be used to lead people out of the slavery of sin. And so instead of us thinking of it as a negative thing that drains our time, a negative thing that can, bring us to temptation, that is all true. And so, throughout the book and stuff, I also talk about how to set boundaries with yourself and the guard edges of your day. That is true. But ultimately, the value in a tool is what we do with it and what we allow God to do with it through us. So let's, with that in mind, I want you to think about how every single one of us, every church member, can be involved in reframing how we use our time spent online, how we utilize and leverage our digital influence. Because, my friends, it doesn't matter whether you have 4 friends or 40,000, you have influence, and what you do with that influence matters. But we have to rethink our time in the digital space. So, why digital discipleship and evangelism? And I will say this, it is simply a way to activate your social and your digital influence of your membership to build a bridge to the local community, because we have to serve others. It's also a way to develop a meaningful understanding of people's felt needs. And we'll talk about how this is following Jesus's model to determine relevant ways to serve the community and share the gospel, basically meet people where they are. It's a way, as an individual, we can scale up friendship evangelism. We can stay in touch with people more than just the time we see them in church. We can touch their lives every day of the week. And we can empower our congregations to be actively involved in the larger goals and mission of our church. And we'll talk about how every member, if they are online, if they have email, if they have a smartphone and the ability to text, or they use messenger apps, or they have a social media profile, it doesn't matter what platform it is, they can use that to be digital door knockers. So I hope this is getting you guys excited. There's a big comment in there, so I will definitely respond to that one at the end. So, right. Or we can simply put it this way. It's a way to reach seekers. So the average person spends 9 to 18 hours a day behind a screen. That's insane. But when we think about it, 9 to 18 hours a day behind a screen, that is how we live our lives these days. And that's a lot of opportunity, because when we actually looked at specifically socialization, we found that people spend 3 times as much time socializing online or through digital tools like texting than they do in person. And these are pre-COVID numbers, because the new accurate numbers, or whatever, the new scope of numbers usually takes about a year. So hopefully this year I'll start to be able to get some updated graphics and numbers based on our new COVID reality. But the point is this: we spend more time engaging with people through digital tools and technologies than life allows us to engage with them in person. And this was true before COVID. So how important is it now? And when we look particularly at young people, their time spent with digital tools and technologies is only limited by the fact that they need to shower and sleep. So if we're going to reach them, we must think of this space as a country, as a digital mission field. And there's a lot of opportunity. It's way open because we've been hesitant to embrace technology. We are not present in the spaces where people are. And, an analog truth of evangelism is you must go where people spend their time. A Gallup poll looked at, and again, this is pre-COVID, because it's probably like 1% now, but only about 20% of Americans attend church. So more than 20% of Americans identify as Christian, but only 20% actually regularly attend church. So how do we reach that other 80%? Well, we go where they spend their time, not where we want them to be. We have spent so much time as a Christian church trying to pull people out of the digital spaces, when we should be stepping into the digital spaces and helping them find our messages of hope and wholeness. And so we have to create programs based on their felt needs and format them in a way that actually makes sense for their reality and how they interact with the world. People are literally Googling for God. Each year, there are millions of Google searches to questions like, is God real? What happens when we die? Or questions like, why must we die? Why do children die? How do I know I'm saved? Does God really love me? Why is there so much suffering in the world? But I have to tell you, when you Google that, Christians, the Adventist message is not present, because we have not had a concerted effort towards content evangelism, creating content to meet the needs of what people are searching for. And this is a huge part of what we need to be doing, because we'll talk about the seeker, experience in a moment, but people are searching online. We need to be the voice that answers back. And even more than that, right now, when people search church online, what do they find? They find watching people in a building. And now with COVID, they see people on stage in an empty building. So people who are searching for answers, they need more than just a program they want to watch. They need a community that answers back. They need something more than just static content being pushed out at them. We need to build community online. And so one way to understand sort of this modern experience, and this, I have to tell you, I have lived personally, because I converted from atheism in my early 20s. So I've been a Christian now for almost 20 years. But even my experience back when you had to use a CD to go online, I started in the digital space. Now I'm an early adopter, I'm a technocrat, but for me, it was much easier for me to search for answers to my questions because I wasn't ready to talk to a person and I didn't know who to talk to. I went online, and that's where I did my research. So a way to understand this modern world of analog and digital experiences is this idea of causal loop systems, or journey loops. It's basically a seeker can go through this system of starting from C awareness to becoming a member. And the loops don't have to go in order. I personally started in sort of the think consideration after having a very powerful experience with God, where a voice spoke into my life and saved me from being in a car where I probably would have died from a car accident, but that's a whole other story. That's not what we're talking about tonight. But I can tell you guys more about it later if you want to know. But I started in the think consideration, the research and discovery loop. And I spent a lot of time there because by nature, my faith started intellectually because I had a powerful experience, something I could not explain, something supernatural spoke into my life. And that drove me to research because that is how God made me. I started out very intellectual in my faith. And then I moved to sort of the care relationships. I actually started building relationships with Christians. I met some Adventists. And then from there, I actually moved out and decided to do or visit. So the point of this relationship is to see how a complex system, can help us visualize a complex system of how somebody might experience a journey. These distinct elements are interrelated and they're organized to achieve a common purpose or goal. So people are, oh, somebody needs to mute.
Please mute your mic. Please mute your mics, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. So in today's modern world, people are turning to the internet for answers. We can see this in the search query. So the first two parts of the journey, the see awareness, where they might possibly become aware, and the think consideration, a lot of times that is happening in the digital space. So if we want to steer people in a healthy direction, if we want to steer people towards the Adventist message, we must be present. Now, the next part of the stage, the do, the visit, that can happen in person or in the digital space, and they're equally valid. So engage could be signing up for a digital Bible study, or signing up to watch a video series, or do online Bible studies, or subscribe to a channel, or come to a church, or reach out to a Bible worker, whatever it might be. And then ideally, we want those last two parts of the journey to have an in-person physical experience, but it is just as relevant in the digital space. I hear from digital missionaries all the time that they are reaching people in countries where there are no Christian churches. So, we're talking about predominantly Muslim countries or something like that. For my husband and I's ministry, we're reaching people in the UAE and other Middle Eastern countries that I won't mention. We actually have people reaching out to us from China. And so there's some people out there where they might be limited. They might not be able to walk into the door of an Adventist church anytime soon, but their experience to become part of an online community is just as valid and just as relevant and just as needed. And so this is where we have to seek to find ways to extend the church experience, to extend our community online, realizing that there are, people are coming from many different situations. So this model that I'm talking about, it is an integrated approach, meaning it's digital and traditional. We're not replacing traditional. We are building upon traditional. There is always going to be that need for a real in-person experience. But with times changing and fluctuating, the shifts are going to change. So like right now, we really have an opportunity to develop and grow our online communities and figure out what that looks like, so that in the future, we can move between the two for whoever needs it. But using digital tools is a way to amplify what we already know about evangelism for a long-term strategy for outreach, community service, growth, and of course, evangelism and conversion. So this model is 3 roles. You have your content creators, or this could also be curators, meaning these are people who package the gospel message and our teachings into various digital friendly formats. And this can be anything. So this could be videos, it could be podcasts, it could be images, blogs, TikTok videos, like whatever format is relevant for the audience they're trying to reaching. They're taking these, these principles from the Bible, these principles from the voice of prophecy and the ministry of healing and everything that we have, and they're packaging it for the digital space. Engagers are, those empathetic, those frontline workers of an organization. They're sort of the customer service agents of the church. They can work specifically for your church as part of the organization, or they can work independently as digital disciples, and they intentionally engage in online conversations to build relationships with people, to better understand their felt needs, not what we assume they need, and determine meaningful ways to serve others in the community. And then the last role is the distributors. And this is a role that I say anybody in your church who is connected online can be a distributor. These are people who use their digital influence, their digital tools and technology. So this is email, texting, social media, whatever you got, and they share it within their sphere of digital influence. The model could be simply demonstrated like this, where you have the content creators, they're pushing out content, the distributors are sharing it in order to organically magnify that reach. Again, none of this costs anything. And then you have the engagers. These are the people who are building relationships, following up, praying for people, ordering them groceries if they're food insecure, whatever it is. These are the frontline, like, ministry workers. Now, the good thing about this role is that it truly includes everybody, because I'm talking about a holistic model. So what this means is that the 84-year-old greeter at your door is just as much a part of the team as the tech-savvy youths who are pushing out the content and sharing it. Because it is one thing to get someone to come into your church community. It is another thing to get them to stay. And this is where you can really strengthen those cross-generational relationships. Because I, for one, the person I enjoy coming to church to see is a woman named Barbara Anoski. She kind of looks like this woman. She makes me feel welcome. She's like a grandmother to me. I love seeing her. I come to church to see her, because as a younger person with a child, I'm perfectly happy to see the message online. But if I want to have that community, that relationship, it's that relationship with Barbara and many other members of my church that makes it meaningful, that helps me to stay connected with my church family. Now, on Sunday, we're going to go into a deep dive on the foundation of building a digital strategy. But I just want to make this point. This all has to start with a strategic plan. You have to be very intentional and thoughtful with your communications. So you have to organize, what your church is doing. You have to rally the troops, come up with your team members in order to maximize impact. So we have to think a little bit differently about how we're going to do ministry when we start engaging in digital spaces. A strong foundation includes sort of these 4 points. And again, this is just a very short preview into what we're going to talk about Sunday morning, but you have to set goals. So many ministries, I find that they're online because they know they need to be online, but they haven't set clear goals and determined metrics. So there's no unified purpose as to what they're trying to achieve. They have to be on the right platforms or be using the right software to reach the audience that they're trying to reach. So you really have to understand your audience. You have to, go where they spend their time and understand what their felt needs are, because then you can make ministry and faith relevant when you meet them where they are. And that takes really understanding them deeply. And of course, planning integratively, so that whatever you're doing for your traditional communications and your digital communications, planning them together so that digital is not an afterthought if you're still doing like postcards and stuff like that. here are some resources. I promise those resource links. You guys can take this presentation later, and I'll try to upload it in the chat too. You guys can take this, copy those links, and plug it in and go right there and see and read deeper into these topics. So if we take a moment, I'm going to just unpack a little bit, a teaser on each of these roles. So we talked about before, the content creators, or these creatives are people who take on content as mission. So our church has many spiritual gifts, and we've done a really, really good job of, uplifting those who teach, who have the gift of hospitality, who have the gift of speaking. But we have so many tech savvy and so much skill in the church right now, but we haven't found a way to really show them that it's valued. And one way to make room for digital discipleship and evangelism is to start acknowledging that there is a gift in storytelling, that there is a gift in creating content and video editing and all that stuff. That too can be a gift that is used for kingdom building. And so we know that people search online for answers to their questions. If we think of content as mission, if we create content specifically to address the real questions people are asking, we can be the voice that answers back, and we can share our messages of hope and wholeness and meet people when they're searching for those answers. There's two ways to do this. You can actually create content, and I always recommend a hybrid, but you can create content that focuses on those mental, physical, spiritual needs specific to your community. You know your community best. You know what your internal church needs, and you will hopefully do the research, and you may already know what your local community needs within, the geographic location of your church. So create content that is specific to the needs that they're facing every day, those felt needs. And you could also curate content, because the burden on you isn't to create everything, but to share relevant content as well. And I always like to say, it's kind of strengthening your point. So otherwise it's like, writing a research paper and you're your only source. So if you're going to tackle possibly like isolation and depression, you can certainly write blogs and create videos talking about how to deal with that, and how the Bible and how our faith can help us through that. But then you can also share content that other people are creating to help reinforce your message. So you don't have to create everything. And when we're thinking about what to create again and what to do with digital discipleship and evangelism, this model was set by Jesus. And you might think, well, wait, he wasn't using social media, but what would Jesus do if he was using social media? If we look at what he did, he met the spiritual, the physical, the emotional needs of people. He met them where they are, with the question, with the need, with whatever it was that they were dealing with in that moment. Then he bid them come and follow. So for too long, we've been using digital communications to bid people to follow, to come to our next event, we're always promoting our events or that in-service program. And that's nothing wrong with that. We should continue to do that. But our focus should be this idea of meeting people's needs and then inviting them to come into our faith community. So, and what did Jesus do? The kind of content he shared is he shared stories. Stories are incredibly powerful. And we'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow, about stories and how they just touch people. And he, like Jesus, he told parables. We can tell stories to help tackle those difficult topics and to get people to think. And certainly those personal testimonies are always very powerful. He shared godly wisdom. People are looking for answers for life's difficult questions. Why not give them the Christian perspective on, whatever that is? And so I think the church needs to be more candid in its approach and to tackle those tough questions that we've maybe shied away from publicly. He attended to people's needs. We talked about that. He answered people's questions regarding spiritual matters. He gave them hope. He created community. This is something we can do in a very real way. And we can use digital technologies to reinforce and enhance community. He developed an engaged, active church body. This model is one where every member can be involved. He led people to wholeness, and he equipped them to replicate the model and become disciples. This is a model where we encourage mentorship, where we encourage people to be creative and to use their skills and tools so that everybody can be involved and everybody can learn from each other. Because not only can the older generation, the experienced generation, mentor down to the younger generation, because a lot of those traditional evangelistic ideas are applicable in the digital space. That wisdom is still incredibly relevant. But then not only can the young learn from that, but the young can also mentor up and teach us about technology and the culture and their world, which is so different from how many of us have lived most of our lives. And when we're creating content, this is really important. So we never want to get into this idea of just creating content just to push something out. We should always be asking, how will their attitude and perceptions of God or themselves change because of your piece of content? So if people are struggling with self-esteem and, various other issues, how will their own self-value, their own perception of self change? Because, I'm reading a book right now, and one of the things many people struggle with is, I've sinned too far. So how can your content change that perception where they can understand that God can always reach them? God can always dip into their life and change their lives and make them anew. So really consider that when we're thinking about our types of content. Resources, you guys can, of course, reference later. Now, the next role are these engagers. And so this is where we can ask, well, what does community look like in the digital space? Well, when we start thinking about our ability to connect with others as an opportunity to advance the kingdom of God, because so often we are online and we text people and we share things, and we'll share things about shampoo or movies or like a new product we like, or our lunch for the day, or a new place we found to exercise, or a new whatever we're following. But we need to reframe that and understand we can do that very thing that we're used to doing, but do it for the kingdom. And then use that as an opportunity to have a conversation. And I always joke, when COVID first came out, if only I had as many people sharing our messages of hope and wholeness in my inbox as I had people sharing to me conspiracy theories about COVID, I would not need to be here today. We share everything online, but the gospel. And we need to reframe our use of digital spaces and reframe how we do it. And one of the important ways we can do this is we can use it for relationship building. We can use it to listen to people, because being listened to is so close to being loved that most people cannot tell the difference. And so this is where we're going to touch, and we're going to dig a little deeper into this tomorrow, but this idea of reflective listening, to weep with those who weep and to rejoice with those who rejoice, to get invested in their lives. This is a powerful personal ministry opportunity, and believe it or not, it can save lives. So in 2016, the Florida Hospital Center came up with this, I'm not sure what to call it, but depiction of the 8 root causes of the 10 leading causes of death. And this astounded me, because something clicked in my brain, because I looked, okay, we have cancer, we have suicide, we have pneumonia, diabetes, Alzheimer's, accidents, chronic lung disease, stroke. But the 8 root causes are 8 things that the church can be doing to improve the well-being of others, meaning we can literally save lives. And I'll talk about a really interesting case study tomorrow night, but the 8 root causes are external and internal stress. Meaningless existence. If you know that you are a child of God and that every person is on this earth for a purpose, no matter how big, no matter how small, you do not have a meaningless existence. Lack of information or education. The church can certainly help with that. That's a service we can provide. Anger and frustration. We can help people find the peace of the gospel and Sabbath rest. Loneliness and social isolation. If you are part of a church family, you should not be suffering from loneliness and social isolation. Low self-esteem or self-worth. If you know that you are created in the image of God, you have self-worth. Economic disparity. obviously something the church should be attending to. Helplessness or emotional despair. Again, this is where the church can be making a huge impact in people's lives. And this is the roles of the engagers, to build those relationships, understand people's felt needs, and find practical ways to help. This is ministry in the 21st century. We can use digital tools and technologies to do this. And I've heard so many stories and stuff, and even I have a couple of personal experiences where I know a few people who lost their jobs, and luckily now they found new, better jobs, actually, who lost their jobs at the beginning of COVID. I have a background in marketing and writing. I helped them get their resume together. My brother-in-law hadn't written a resume in 16 years. He had been at the same job for 16 years, and they let him go. Everybody has something they can offer, whether that's buying groceries for something, whether that's helping somebody write a resume, whatever it is, we all have something to bring to the table, and we can use that to really let people know that we care about them and to build relationships and trust. So our goal in using social media is to understand and fulfill needs in others, to improve the well-being of others. And when we go back and we look at content evangelism, we know that the number one reason people share content online is because they feel it will improve the lives of others. My friends, the Adventist Church should be the leader in creating content and services that improve the lives of others. We should have the most shareable content on the planet. But this means listening without judgment and taking action on a daily basis. And so individual ways as a person can scale up friendship evangelism: just be connected with people. Use it to be intentional about learning about people's lives and asking questions. Show interest. Take advantage of opportunities to serve people, to better understand their expressed needs. Simple examples of this is a college student who has to move every year because you always get those rent discounts, at least in the States. That was always my situation. Help them move every time when they voice something online, or they lost their job, reach out to them, or they lost a loved someone, reach out to them. People share an amazing amount of information online, and if we use our connections as a way to listen to them and to minister to them, this is a great way to reach people who are unchurched. Because of my background, I am connected to tons of people who are atheists, who are unchurched, who are unsure, agnostic, formally churched. They're all spectrums of life. But I can use my influence when I pay attention to what they post. I pray for them. I send them recorded prayers. I've sent groceries. I've done all kinds of things. And this is something every individual can use when we reframe how we use our connections online, how we think about the time spent online. Is if we go on our social media with the purpose of not just scrolling and passing the time and watching an endless spiral of cat videos and somehow ending up on Newtonian physics, but if instead we go online to learn about other people's lives and find ways to minister to them, that can be incredibly powerful. Here are some resources for those of you who want to dig deeper. Again, you're going to get this presentation. So now let's touch on this idea of digital disciples. So this is where we can train every generation in our church to be intentional. You're going to hear me say this word a lot: intentional and mindful with how we spend their time online. To actually go online with purpose, not to kill time. To pay attention to the post of friends and contacts. To basically listen more than we speak. It's okay. We should be sharing content in the digital space. We should be humanizing ourselves and being authentic. And we'll talk about that more tomorrow, about how we can be authentic online with our faith. But we can share, but we should listen more. It's not about us, but it's about other people. And we can proactively reach out to people online or via digital tools, and we can take action in appropriate and timely ways. So if there's something that we can do it, and find others who can maybe help in this ministry as well when we know that there's a need. We can, develop a relationship first, empathy first engagement strategy. So what this means, this ties into this idea that Ellen White says in her Ministry of Healing book, and it's this idea of disinterested benevolence. And it's a beautiful concept, because what she's basically saying is do good for others for no other reason than because it's right to do good. So often as Christians, we don't mean to, but we're so enthusiastic about getting people baptized and sharing the 2,300 days and all the truth that we have, that we try and move the person too fast from their immediate felt need to what we want them to know. And so she says, basically minister to people, plant those seeds without any strings attached, like serve them without the strings attached. And this means redefining our notion of success. So we can ask ourselves or our team questions like, how many times did we share the love of Christ? If someone goes to your social media, your personal social media, for those of you who will be doing this personally, do they know you're a Christian? And what would they think about Christians based on what you share? And would they like Christians? How many conversations have you started or engaged with on social media that, have been beneficial to someone else? How are you painting a more authentic picture of yourself, your faith, of the church? How are you building relationships? Because that is an important thing to do. Do you better understand the needs of those you're connecting with online? Or are you just sharing your lunch? Have you found meaningful and practical ways to help people? Here's some resources to dig deeper. Now, the final part of the roles is this idea of distributors and using our digital influence, whether it's text, email, messaging apps like WhatsApp, or social media platforms, any social media platform, as a distribution tools. Because what we have found is that modern technology has decentralized the message. So even just 50, 60 years ago, if you wanted to hear someone preach, you had to go to a location, sometimes travel long distances, and be there every night. Now you can scroll speakers through, any time of the day that's convenient for you. You can scroll them on YouTube. So we can actually activate our membership to be a reach vehicle for souls, because we don't have a distribution. We don't have a message problem. Rather, we have a distribution problem, because we have the gospel. We have the greatest story ever told of Christ's birth, life, sacrificing, death, resurrection, and soon return. As the Adventist Church, we have the three angels' messages, sent to every nation, tribe, people. We as a people, we have the gift of prophecy and the ministry of healing. We don't have a message problem. We have a distribution problem. And every single person who is called as a Christian is called to be a disciple, to share the gospel. And it has never been easier. We can reach, you can have 10 people show up in person to a Bible study, but you can have thousands watch the same lesson online. We have a huge opportunity to activate the individual influence of every member of our church, no matter how big or small that is. And this is through what I call digital door knocking. And this is basically when you just share spiritual content on your social media profiles or through messaging and email to create an opportunity to people engage with you about your faith. That opportunity might be at midnight. It might be at 2:30 in the afternoon. Because when we think about traditional door knocking, and again, you don't have to be the creator of the content. We don't see Clifford Goldstein going door to door selling his books. You can curate content as an individual. You can share the content of your church and share what they're pushing out. You can be a digital distributor this way. But it creates an opportunity when it's convenient for the person. Because when we think of traditional door knocking, how often do you actually catch people home and available in our busy society? I always want to talk about Jesus, but if you show up randomly at my door, it's highly unlikely I'm going to have time to talk to you in that moment. But if you share content online, I can comment at 3 a.m. when I can't sleep, or when I'm up at 5:30 in the morning with a newborn. Like the person can engage with the content from the privacy of their home when it's convenient for them, and then they can reach out to you. And this is something every member can do. So it's simple. We can train our membership to forward your emails. If you send out a weekly blog message or a video or something like that, train the congregation to commit to forwarding it weekly, to text invitations to, about video series or online sermons or in-person experiences or grocery pickups or whatever it is. Encourage people to invite others through digital tools and technologies. Encourage them to share your church's content, on their own, on their own profiles. They can live stream events or share live stream events. They can share their Bible study online from their groups. They can even just simply like, love, or wow your content on Facebook posts, and that increases organic reach. They can post to community apps or groups like Nextdoor about upcoming events. So a lot of what I'm seeing here in the States, and I don't know if you have this app called Nextdoor, but it's a hyper community, it's a hyper local application. So you join your neighborhood and you just post to your own neighborhood. And so you can share events like grocery pickups or Girl Scout cookies, or, there's also this Buy Nothing group that I'm part of, where people trade stuff, with kids. And there's a lot of opportunities there where you can post on there about, food drives or whatever it is. You can use these applications that are community driven. You can find ways to connect with your neighbors and community and share your faith. And you can just follow, join, or support Christian groups online. These are ways that digital distributors can help. Some resources to dig a bit deeper. So just as a reminder, the role is these three simple groups: the content creators, the engagers, and distributors. People might find themselves in one or more of those roles, and that's fine. But this is something we can start thinking about how we can organize our congregations to get involved in this kind of stuff. Now, up next, tomorrow night, we're going to take these ideas and we're going to make them really practical for our personal ministry leaders or various other ministry leaders, or just individuals, to implement these strategies and these ideas and these concepts in their life. And then Sunday morning, we're going to dig really deep in how to build a strong digital strategy for your church and ministry. So we're going to talk about branding. We're going to talk about goals and measuring success and what that looks like, and coming up with a strategic plan. Here are, if you want more resources, sdadata.org has over 500 resources that I put together on that website. My personal website is jdim.digital. There's free resources on both of those. If you don't already have the book, it's available in digital and print formats. There's two links there. You can get it from Advent Source, sdadata.blog/book, or Amazon. It's just /Amazon, same URL. And so now I'm going to close my stop sharing, and we're going to start answering questions. Okay, so somebody has a good question about how do you make sure the deaf members or deaf, hard of hearing people in the community can be ministered to? Well, and there's other questions. Do you use closed captioning every time? If so, what tips or content can you suggest our conference to look into? So there are a lot of captioning options. I will say this, because of finances and stuff, I think in the moment can be limited unless you're using Google Meet. So Google Meet actually does really fantastic, in the moment closed captioning. You can, for Zoom, link it with something else to do closed captioning. So there are options there. But the cool thing about both Facebook and YouTube is that they will auto-generate the captions, and they're getting really good. And so always, make sure that option is available, because it's not practical to type out, 40 minutes of someone's sermon. But you can do the auto-generated captions. And if you're producing short video snippets, then I would encourage you to upload the script and kind of proof for the short messages. The other thing you can do is, if you do have members of your community who are hard of hearing or deaf, if you have someone who's a sign language interpreter, perhaps you can include them in your service or in your Bible studies or any kind of special events that you have, where we've seen it now, if you're doing sort of the digital, where you have the main screen is maybe the speaker, and then in the corner there's a sign language interpreter, or you have the speaker and the sign language interpreter on stage together. If that is an option for you, I would strongly encourage that, especially if you're doing evangelistic series. You could also, when promoting the evangelistic series, you can let people know that there will be a sign language interpreter, and that would encourage people who are hard of hearing or deaf to participate in the live event, because you're right, they are often excluded. And just like we have been inadvertently excluding some disabled people from the worship experience, we don't want to continue, excluding the hard of hearing. So if as much as possible, include sign language interpreters and closed captions. Okay. Yeah, so it sounds like this person who's speaking, they're members of the church who are deaf and they have deaf friends. So it sounds like you have quite a few deaf members in the community. So it would be worth maybe finding someone who can do the sign language interpretation. Okay. I do not know actually of any online disability or deaf community groups, but I believe the North American division does have a deaf ministries that you could probably reach out to, and they would probably have answers for you on that. And I'll just try to search that real quick. I'm pretty sure they do. If you go to NAD, they have, yes. So they have a ministry special project coordinator. Her name is Esther Doss, and I will just send her email here in the chat box. So I would reach out to her because that would, of course, be very beneficial if, she already knows some of that information for you. Okay, so someone's asking, I'm interested in creating a podcast for our church. Where would you recommend I start? Now, I guess, are you talking about content? Like, where do I start with content, or how do I start practically? I actually have a guide for podcasting that I'll just send you the link to answer that question. So there's many different ways that you can start practically. But if you're talking about content, the first place you should always start when shaping your content for ministry is determining who your target audience is. And let me just grab this link because I can't talk and scroll at the same time, apparently. But there's a really how to start a podcast. Yes. So this is actually by an Adventist blogger, podcaster, Leslie Samuel, and it's a really great resource for how to practically start. But I'm also going to send you guys a link to this, how to understand your audience, because it doesn't matter if it's a podcast, doesn't matter if it's a video series, any kind of ministry, before you start, you really need to hone down who you're trying to reach. So this is the understanding your audience guide. And then from there, once you understand your audience, you can then determine what is the most relevant content based on the needs, unique or specific to that audience. Does the church NAD have content creators for generic topics, i.e. health, parenting, marriage, etc.? I wish, honestly, they did more of this. I personally feel that at the division level, that should be one of their biggest roles, is creating the type of content that the local church cannot. But right now, I'm afraid to say most of that void is being filled by individual, digital missionaries. They do have some content. So if you go to like children's ministries and family ministries, they do create some blog posts and some videos. But I would really love for them to own content creation and content evangelism in a big way. I know this is something that they're really starting to think about, but it would require a lot of restructuring on their part, because right now they don't have the manpower to be dedicated to content creation. So what are some of the best sites for pictures and visuals? Okay, so first of all, I love a site called canva.com. It has really great templates. It's great for if you don't have a designer on your team, you can look like you have a designer on your team. It makes it really easy, and you can even do some simple animation with that. If you buy a pro account, which is about $120 a year, there's tons of images that you have access to for that. I also personally like, for Christian images, lightstock.com. It's a little bit more expensive. Oh, sorry, I messed up the URL, but you can fix it. Lightstock.com. Yeah. lightstock.com and canva.com. Oh, sorry. I'm accidentally responding privately to that person. So let me do canva.com, lightstock.com. And I realized the other sources I linked to were also privately. So this is for the deaf ministry contact. There we go. And so in the message I just sent is the deaf ministry contact, which is Esther Doss, and then the link to how to start a podcast step by step, and then a link to the PDF download of Understanding Your Audience. Yes, so I'll just send that again, Jamal, publicly, the podcast link. Yep. So it's the Become a Blogger, How to Start a Podcast, a step-by-step guide. And also on the SDA data, there's a design just resources page that has a lot of like quick tips for design and also image resources. Like I put together a whole resource for that. So this is going to be just design resources. So you can get really nice stuff without, being a professional designer and without breaking the bank. All right, any other questions? Keep them coming, guys. I'm just going to scroll to make sure I got, oh, somebody says, Waverly, hopefully I said that right, had the same experience with being delighted to seeing an older member each week who was a greeter. Yes, I think for many of us, they become like our grandparents when we've lost our grandparents. And it's cross-generational relationships are super important. And that's really what I miss most about COVID is I don't get to see my new grandparents as much as I used to. Let's see, it's oh, somebody's tuning in from Spencerville, Maryland. Hi. All right. All right, let's see here. Oh, you said church should not just share the surface and extension. We should be assessing our product. How should we set goals for our church's live stream? So one of the things with your live stream, and there's also another guide that I'm going to send you guys. It's great to post the entire service. That's really great for your community that you already have, your membership who does want to hear about, church life. But ultimately, you should take your sermons, you should cut them out, and you should put them up on YouTube and optimize them for search so that you can get a lot more views. Because when a seeker's coming along and let's say that sermon addresses a topic that they're seeking for, they don't want to fast forward 40 minutes into the service to see the sermon. They should be able to just find the message. And so I put together a guidebook. This is all free. Everything I'm sending you guys is free. So just be sure to click on it and you can download the resources. So this is the YouTube. So I would encourage everybody to download the YouTube guidebook. And what you ultimately want to do for setting goals for your live stream is to not only encourage engagement during the stream and have people there who are also responding and liking comments and getting people to, do shout outs for where they're watching from or whatever, but to then take your messages, repackage them and optimize them for search so that you actually can get a lot more archived views so that your content then has an evergreen shelf life so that it can be ministering to people in infinitum, basically like forever, whoever needs your content. So let's say you have a message that specifically addresses why does God seem absent? You can cut out the sermon from your whole service, post that online, follow the principles in that guidebook I just sent you guys. Please download it. You can also find it on my website, jdim.digital, and go through all those best practices. And using those best practices, you will get so much more. You will get found in rankings. You'll be optimized for search. And so that your content will come up when people are searching for that answer, because we used all the principles for Angels in the Glen that are outlined in that guide. in our ministry, we soft launched this past year. And in like the 6 months of 2020, when we started putting up content, we now have over 250,000 views and I think 45,000 hours of watch time. We have reached far more people than my husband could have ever taught in person, just by using these, specific, best practice strategies. Oh, someone's saying, any tips for ministering to a senior who are new to technology? So you're talking about ministering to them. Well, the first step is to teach them how to use the technology. If they're learning to FaceTime or if they're learning to use Zoom, and being incredibly patient, and then reinforcing and just continually using it with them so that they get used to it and becomes normalized to them. Do you have an outline of which social media platforms are best for which demographics? Actually, yes, I do. Let me find, I have a link for that. So it's actually, I wrote a blog for it. I haven't written too many blogs on my website, but okay, copy a link. So here is the, I'm gonna make sure I'm responding to these. Everyone. Oh, it's everyone in meeting. Okay. So, okay. So everyone, and then this is the link to platforms, platform info. Okay. So there's that one. Will you be addressing digital music ministry? Not specifically, but if you're talking about like usage rights, streaming rights, and copyright issues, that's also on, I do have a resource for that, actually. Hold on, let me pull that up for you. It's copyright, yeah. So this is actually from Jennifer Gray, who is the, oh no, this specific one's actually from ARM. Okay. Let me send this to you. So this is music ministry. Okay. So that's like streaming liability and any things you have about that, and where you can get some, I think, low cost music. The become a blogger link isn't working. Let me try that one more time. It should be working. Let me see. Oh, wow. So that post must have been removed because that was a link that I linked to by Leslie Samuel to start a, let me see if I can just find it. Samuel. Okay, so I think maybe he has a new one. Let me send you this one. There it is. Let me send you. I probably need to update that link then. Okay, everyone. New podcast. There it is. So that's a really good resource that he put together. And there's a second one. My internet's being slow. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, our family joined my 93-year-old dad up to date on WhatsApp today. Amen. And I have to say, do not misjudge the elderly. Where there's a will, there's a way. We actually have a member of our congregation who nobody really knows how old she is. She's like 900 years old. And I'm not joking. Like, we don't know how old she is. She's got to be at least 90. And she is on we have at least one Zoom Bible study a day for our church, and she's on every single one. She's always on, and she's always texted Evan. She's the first one on, and she never has any problems. And she's super good. Before COVID, when we were really using our digital influence to share about events and stuff that our church was doing, she was a great digital disciple. She spread those emails everywhere. She doesn't have social media, but she would send the emails to everybody that she could think of. She would print them out and give them to her neighbors. Like, she was on fire, and she definitely was able to adapt to the technology. and set an example, I think, for everybody else to aspire to. So someone's asking, any advice to learning TikTok to minister to the youth? So my advice on when we're trying to reach youth is to empower somebody within the demographic we're trying to reach. So we know this in the physical mission field, that it's always best to uplift someone from the community that we're trying to reach and empower them. I think this is also true for young adults. We should be training and mentoring them. They're digital natives. They know how to use the tools and technologies. And I see a lot of creative content on TikTok for how they're retelling Bible studies, and it's different than what we might be used to or what we might be comfortable with, but it's really creative, and it's really, they know how to speak to their own culture. They know how to speak to people just like them. And I think when we allow them that opportunity and then that freedom to use their skills for ministry, that can be more powerful than someone older, not part of the target audience, getting on to reach people. Now, I did just upload the presentation to the Zoom chat. You guys can download it. I'm also going to send it to Pastor Millett when this is over, so he can maybe email it out to everybody. But yeah. Let's see here.
Thank you. We'll be sure to distribute it widely.
Thank you. So any last questions or comments?
Well, Jamie, we want to thank you very much for launching out into the deep with us and get us looking at digital discipleship and evangelism, getting us familiar with some of the language and some of the approaches in this model. And so we want to invite everyone to join us again tomorrow at 5 p.m. when Sister Jamie will continue looking at discipleship tips for personal ministries. And you don't have to be someone who may not be familiar with technology. Come, listen, and join in, ask your questions, and be blessed. So we want to just again thank you. Wow, we are excited about what's happening, and we know that the Spirit of the Lord is moving as we learn more together.